Hello, today is the 9th of August, 2023. I'd like to discuss today a trend that I've been noticing about the opponents of critical race theory being taught in schools and how these people, these groups of people that are opposing the teaching of real history, critical race theory, how these people are basically using the term as a catch-all phrase to include what baselessly perceived to be racist teachings, what they call divisive teachings, what they call inclusion and diversity teaching, and by the way, which I find nothing wrong with teaching anyone about inclusion and diversion, but these people do. And they also want to include in that term CRT or critical race theory, they want to include communism, Marxism, and socialism. And they want to basically change the meaning of CRT to include and cover all of these things, which they also mention causes shame, it causes exclusion of certain races, it causes friction, and again, division. And these people don't really know, most of them I believe, don't really know what critical race theory entails, what it means, what it actually teaches. They don't really know that critical race theory in its official definition or academic definition is a high-level course and a theoretical course on history and its relationship, its ties to race, which are very, very real. It discusses topics that are quite advanced and quite intricate. However, critical race theory is also the truth, is also real history. History that it is real enough in some cases to be a bit discomforting. And even if you basically simplify, even if you bring all this content, history, and theories down to a very basic level, even then it is history that has rarely, if ever, been taught in classrooms, in any setting for that matter. And yes, for many people it's different, it's shocking, it's uncomfortable. But it is, however, based on truth. It is the truth. It is true history. It is inclusive history. It names peoples and their races and their views on race as they themselves admitted to, wrote, and recorded through their writings and actions. So it is actually the truth. And what these people want to do is prevent the truth from being taught even at a basic level, but their ultimate aim is to remove it at any level, whether it be basic, intermediate, or advanced. And they want to deflect. They want to misdefine it. They want to include things like communism, socialism, and Marxism, all of which, again, are part of history, are legitimate forms of social organization and government, just like capitalism is, just like democracy is, just like monarchies are, just like theocracies. All of that still exists, including communism and socialism. And why on earth would it not be discussed? Why on earth would it have to be censored? Just by you discussing something doesn't mean that you are ready to jump in and practice it. Just because you teach something doesn't mean that you will all of a sudden support it. Just because you bring up massacres and killings and genocide committed by certain groups, certain religions, certain societies, certain nations, doesn't mean that you will want to repeat that. In fact, it is the absolute opposite. You discuss such things so you don't forget, so you know what happened, so you know how it happened. Doesn't matter who perpetrated, doesn't matter where it was perpetrated. It needs to be discussed and remembered. However horrific, uncomfortable, or divisive it may be, it needs to be discussed to prevent and to recognize our mistakes so that we don't commit those same mistakes again, so that if we see any kind of pattern, any kind of actions and words and rhetoric that resemble going back to those mistakes or recommitting those mistakes, then we can align, we can correct our course, we can adjust our course so that we don't fall into the same cycle pattern of the past that led us into a certain outcome, which was very negative. For example, if you take Nazi Germany and you see what happened, how it happened, that Hitler and his cohorts, his henchmen came to power, the rhetoric that was spewed before he gained and robbed power. If you see the same thing, the same patterns, the same occurrences happening, of course, you will take precaution and correct whatever needs to be corrected so that we don't fall into the same situation where fascism takes over, militarism takes over, violent behavior, and despotism takes over again. So you want to prevent all of these things so that you can prevent pretty much disaster, suffering, war, criminality, widespread corruption, widespread persecution, and even genocide as it happened in Nazi Germany and all of the nations that fell under its influence and even occupation and control. So these people, these opponents of CRT, want to say that these people are trying to teach the proponents, the supporters of CRT are trying to teach Marxism, racism, even what they probably call reverse racism. They want to teach communist ideas. They really can't name and point to the books, the article, the passages that they claim to be racist, divisive, unbearably uncomfortable. They can't point to passages that are communist or socialist, if those were to be considered negative, as these people consider. Yes, communism has produced very harmful outcomes in governments throughout the world. So has capitalism. Socialism is still used today in many, many countries to very great benefit, and in other countries to not so much benefit. Socialism is part of the United States itself, although it is not called that. Social programs and the many, many areas of the government, including the military and the armed forces, are governed by a form of socialism, of government regulated control and distribution and management, which are very, very beneficial to the nation. It has just been demonized. The word has been taken out of context, taken out of its true definition. It has all kinds of stigma here in the United States, especially, and it has been associated with the worst catastrophes and failures around the world, such as the famines, the despotism, the dictatorships that have occurred around the world, the wars that have occurred around the world, when in fact most wars have not been started by communist countries. They have in fact been started by fascist countries, including Germany, which was actually a democratic country when war broke out during World War I, as well as Austria-Hungary, were monarchies, kingdoms, and theocracies at best, and not communist at all. To my knowledge, communist Russia or the USSR never started any war. It engaged in a war of defense, of course. It turned into offense once they gained enough power and standing during World War II, especially, to fight back the Germans and gained back their territory, control over their territory, and then they moved on into Eastern Europe and Germany itself to basically disarm Germany, which was in charge, in power, in control over much of Eastern Europe, in fact, most of Europe at the time. So this notion that communism, socialism are extremely terrible and detrimental and have been detrimental to the world is just a false statement. It is a false pretense that wants to be perpetuated by these people. These people want to solidify in all of the people's minds that these things are horrible. They were horrible. And they are horrible, although socialism is used to the very, very advantage, to the very well-organized and benefitful governments of many, many European nations, Asian nations, and some of the most capitalistic nations in the world have very much socialist programs within their governments. So when you look at it, when you study it, when you dissect these people's goals, these people's ideas, their aims, they just want to, one, hide the truth, hide true American history, hide the fact that early America was founded on the backs of African American slaves, on the backs of Native Americans. It was founded on violence, on the stealing of labor, of manpower from both the African Americans and the indigenous people. It was a nation that was born from theft of both land, treasure, and labor. And this is part of what CRT teaches. This is what these people want to hide for very obvious reasons, because many of these groups, many of these people are direct benefactors of this theft, this very theft, which they don't want it to be labeled as such, although it is the truth. They don't want it to be labeled as such. They want it to be hidden. They want it to be renamed, relabeled something else. They want this fantasy to remain, be taught in our classrooms, both elementary and advanced. They want anything dealing with injustices, massacres, anything dealing with any kind of theft, any kind of genocide, any kind of contradictions from the Constitution to the laws of the United States, and also to the practice of even the founders and everyone else in the states in power in the United States. They don't want us to remember what actually went on. Also, they want to hide the fact that the United States was very much born because of slavery, because of the wealth ill-gotten from slaves, and to protect also slavery itself. The revolution was in part funded by slavery, and also to the protection of slavery. I want to hide the fact that through the 200 years after the Declaration of Independence, the United States has also been a mostly racist nation when it comes to the people that are in power, the people that inhabit it. Demonstrated through the 200 years of mistreatment, of exclusion for African Americans and indigenous peoples, of exclusion of some immigrants, and the inclusion of European immigrants. I mean, these patterns are very, very clear and well recorded throughout the 200 years after the inception of the United States, many of which are present to this day. Certainly, the consequences, the fallout, the implications of those 200 years of abuse, mistreatments, racism, exclusion, the results of the 200 years of those practices are, of course, still present today in the poverty, in the inequality, in the incarceration percentages and rates, in our economic system, in our education system problem, in our healthcare system problem, in our governments, in the distribution, the very uneven and unfair, very lopsided distribution of power, political, economic, and social throughout the United States, especially the South, is evidence. It is the fallout of what occurred in the last 200 years since the birth of the United States. But make no mistake, the opponents of CRT, critical race theory, that is what they want. They want to censor, erase, thwart efforts to teach, to reveal the truth, to change how and what we learn about American history. Because, in fact, it has been hidden, it has been whitewashed, it has been censored for the last 200 years. And just recently, very recently, it has begun to change. And they have picked up this change on this wave of change that is brewing, that has been in rumbling just below the surface. And they are hearing the rumble. They are feeling the ground shake. And that is what is scaring them. That is what has them shaking and trembling in fear. And that is what is driving them to action. Censor, to block, to cover up the truth, and call it reverse racism, call it divisive content, call it brainwashing, call it indoctrination, call it CRT, call it communism, call it Marxism, socialism. They call it all these names in an attempt to make it negative, demonize it, to scare people. But in fact, their book bans, their threats, their efforts are, I believe, only helping the curiosity. They're only unearthing the curiosity. CRT, hopefully, scholars, people of good faith, of good academic integrity, of goodwill, of honesty will prevail and continue to promote the teaching of the truth, the teaching of critical race theory, the teaching of true American history without pointing fingers at individuals and making them believe that they are directly responsible. In fact, CRT never does that. It never was intended to do so. However, many people throughout the United States and perhaps the world are direct benefactors of slavery, of the stolen labor, the stolen goods, the stolen land. They are direct benefactors, and they do have some responsibility because they carry, they possess, they own a lot of the wealth, a lot, in many cases, obscene amounts of land, wealth, material, and monetary, economic. They own the power that they not only inherited, but was also given to because of the practices, the racist, unfair practices that remain throughout modern times. Talking about 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s, through today. CRT uncovers that. CRT states the fact, whatever the consequences are. CRT is not worried or concerned with consequences. People bring consequences. People decide actions to take on reparations. People decide on the level of responsibility of those holding the wealth and power given and inherited by them. Not a teaching, not CRT, not a certain curriculum, not history. People that are now alive, living today, are the ones to decide how to move forward. But information needs to be known. Information needs to be uncovered. The truth will set you free. Many of these people ignore this very basic and well-known teaching, biblical, moral, and intellectual teaching, that the truth is valuable, the truth is just, no matter what it is, no matter how uncomfortable it may be. That is the very basis of our system of laws, of justice, of just about everything. We have science, history, we have religion, we have governments in a pursuit of truth. And these people want to hide it when all the evidence points to it, when history itself, written history, recorded history, admitted history, demonstrates it and points to it. Give me a break. These people are a joke. Thank you very much.